metal safety deposit box. Inside the box lies a book as well as an envelope. 7 simple words. Do not open until after Ethel's death. A woman stares at the strange book, wondering if its contents would change the world. If only someone could read it. On its pages is a language seemingly unknown by anyone on Earth, as well as illustrations that seem strangely familiar yet otherworldly at the same time. Strange plants twist into odd shapes. Women float in eerie green pools. Celestial diagrams map the heavens in ways never seen before. For centuries, this one-of-a-kind book has plagued the minds of cryptographers, scholars, and researchers, some of whom dedicated their entire lives to solving it. And now, in 2025, we're closer to translating it than ever before. But is humanity finally ready to crack the code? The language in the Voynich manuscript is undecipherable, and it has puzzled experts for 6 centuries since its first recorded discovery. Right now, the manuscript is at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library under lock and key. Only qualified researchers are allowed to examine it, and even then, direct study is restricted due to the understandably fragile state of the manuscript. The general public does, however, have access to it via high-resolution digital scans that one can find at the Yale Beinecke Library website. But they didn't always own it. Its origins may be just as strange as the book itself, and perhaps could shed some light on this enigma. So let's start our investigation there. Hans P. Krauss, who owned the book between 1961 and 1969, bought it for $24,500, approximately $260,000 in today's money. He was a rare book stealer known for his expertise in valuable texts. His hope was to turn a pretty penny for it, believing it to be worth $1.4 million in today's money. But after years of trying and failing to sell it, he gave up and donated it to Yale University. As for who Hans bought it from originally, well, this is where things get a bit interesting. And it's best to talk about 3 owners as they all have a connection to each other. Wilfred M. Voynich, his wife Ethel Lillian Voynich, and a woman named Anne Nil. In 1912, Polish book dealer Wilfred M. Voynich arrived at Villa Mondragon, an old Jesuit retreat near Rome, on a mission. He'd heard that the Jesuit order there was looking to offload some of their valuable manuscripts to fund the upkeep of the villa. Sensing an opportunity, he hurried to Italy to browse the collection, hoping to walk away with something remarkable. And did he ever? Voynich ended up purchasing around 30 manuscripts. Among them was one peculiar book, one that would eventually bear his name. Before that, the manuscript didn't have an official, widely recognized title before Voynich got his hands on it. Realizing that neither the script nor the illustrations resembled anything he had ever seen, Voynich sought help from scholars, cryptographers, linguists, anyone who might be able to crack its code. More eyes on the manuscript meant a better chance of deciphering its secrets, or so he thought. Over the years, Voynich dedicated himself to promoting the book and finding someone, anyone, who could unlock its mysteries. He displayed it, spoke of it publicly, and sent out copies to anyone who might be able to help. Despite all his efforts, his near-obsessive dedication, Voynich never managed to decipher a single word. He died in 1930, with the manuscript secrets still locked away. After his passing, the book was entrusted to his wife, Ethel Lillian Voynich, and its journey continued. She didn't show nearly as much interest in decoding it, perhaps tired of the pursuit. So while running her husband's book business, she tried to sell it, with no luck. So instead, she locked it away in a safety deposit box with a letter addressed to one Anne Nil to only be opened upon her death. Why was Anne Nil so important? Well, at first she was her husband's secretary for a long time, helping him acquire and sell books. Then, after Voynich's death, she helped Ethel run her late husband's business. She also became the widow's live-in companion for the later years of her life. And then, in 1961, Anne managed to sell the manuscript to Hans P. Krauss.
Ever had a bad habit you just couldn't break? Next time, reach for Fume, the award-winning flavored air device, and the sponsor of today's video. Fume is not a vape. It has no battery, no nicotine, no vapor, and no toxins. It doesn't heat anything either, which means you're not inhaling vapor, just naturally flavored air to help satisfy those cravings without the downside. Like cinnamon hearts, spearmint, or our favorite, black licorice, a sweet and strong classic flavor. The best part? Fume's premier sleek wooden design is built for both flavor and function, since it doubles as a fidget toy. Magnetic snaps, clicks, and an adjustable airflow dial with a satisfying sound. Over 500,000 people have made the switch to Fume as part of their habit change journey. For a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using code BREW, you'll get a free Fume topper. Click the link tryfume.com/brew or scan the QR code on the screen to get yours today. And now, back to the story.
Let's go back before these three owners. As mentioned, Voynich bought his book from the Jesuit order. That much was known. But when he bought it, it came with a cover letter that revealed the possible origins of this manuscript. It was written to Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar and expert in Eastern languages. Kircher was known for studying and attempting to decode Egyptian hieroglyphs, even if unsuccessful. This is why he came into possession of the manuscript around 1666. But like many throughout the centuries, he was unable to decipher it. So instead of unlocking its secrets, it simply became another book in his vast collection at the Collegio Romano, now known as the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, and there it sat, untouched for the next couple of centuries or so. Fast forward to 1870. The newly unified Italian government was seizing church properties, and to prevent their vast library from being confiscated, the Jesuits scrambled to hide their most valuable books. Many were secretly transferred to the private collections of faculty members, safely tucked away from government hands. The Voynich manuscript was moved to Villa Mondragone in Frascati, Italy, home to the Jesuits' Ghisilieri College, and there it remained, gathering dust for a time. That is, until Voynich acquired it. If we go back to this letter that Voynich uncovered, it reveals two more owners of the manuscript. The one who wrote Kircher was Johannes Marcus Marci, a physician and head of Charles University in Prague. He's the one who sent it to Kircher, along with the letter. Marci acquired it from his friend, a Prague-based alchemist named George Berisk, after Berisk's passing. In the 1630s, Berisk became obsessed with the manuscript's strange contents and spent years trying to decode it. Convinced it held valuable hidden knowledge, he was the one to originally reach out to Kircher for help, sending his own letter and a copy of the manuscript. And so, this makes Berisk its first confirmed owner. But Berisk clearly wasn't the writer of the manuscript, and so here's where things start to get a bit foggy and speculative. We know now that a man named Jacobus Horczycki de Tepenetz, say that name 3 times fast, was likely a previous owner in the early 1600s. That's because experts used multispectral imaging, a technique that revealed traces of signatures invisible to the naked eye. Doing so, scholars were able to detect faint traces of his signature, likely erased, on the first page of the manuscript, along with some Latin letters and Voynich symbols, clearly an early attempt at deciphering it. Who is this mysterious man, you might be asking? Tepenetz was the personal doctor of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. He's important because if we go back to this cover letter that Voynich uncovered, it identifies the emperor as a previous owner, probably in the late 1500s to early 1600s. He likely gave it as a gift or partial payment to his doctor. According to Voynich, however, he believed the man who sold the emperor the book may have been John Dee, a mathematician and occultist who allegedly brought the codex to Prague, likely because he knew Rudolf was obsessed with the occult. But John Dee kept meticulous diaries and made no mention of the manuscript, at least for the diaries we have from him, as many are missing. It likely was someone else that sold the emperor this manuscript, and we may have found the person. Stefan Guzzi, a manuscript researcher, released a paper for the first international conference on the Voynich manuscript in 2022. In it, he describes how he searched old archives from the Roman Empire. If you remember, according to the letter, Rudolf II bought the manuscript for 600 ducats. Guzzi uncovered only one transaction that matched exactly 600 gold coins, a purchase in 1599, for not a single book, but a collection of books from a man named Karl Widermann. Given the price of the other book transactions, Guzzi concluded that Rudolf II likely paid 600 ducats for a collection, not a single book. So likely Karl Widermann was the owner of this book before the emperor. His paper also sheds light on yet another potential owner, Leonhard Rauwolf. He was a famous German botanist, physician, and traveler born in 1535. Not only had Rudolf II bought 4 hand-drawn botany books authored by Rauwolf a few years prior, but Karl Widermann was also close friends with Rauwolf. Not only that, but when Rauwolf passed in 1596, there's records that the books he had in his possession were sold off. 3 years later, the Voynich manuscript was likely sold to Rudolf II. So while all speculation, it's interesting speculation and lines up fairly well, especially given the numerous botanical illustrations within the book. The question is, where did Rauwolf get the manuscript? Or was he the author? Unfortunately, this is where our case grows cold. Sort of. It's unclear if one of these owners wrote it or if that information is simply lost in time. But there is one last clue, a possible author to this manuscript. If we go back to that same letter, which Voynich took to heart, it stated that Rudolph II believed it had been authored by a man named Roger Bacon, an Englishman. No relation to the famous actor Kevin Bacon, unfortunately, but maybe someone can find 6 degrees of separation. Roger Bacon was a 13th century philosopher, scientist, and alchemist, basically your classic medieval overachiever. Now, by the 1600s, where our trail grows cold, Bacon's reputation had grown quite a bit since his death in the late 1200s. People didn't just see him as some dusty old scholar. They thought he was basically a wizard with tenure. His name got tossed around in the same circles as alchemists, occultists, and other folks who probably spend way too much time staring at bubbling potions. Thanks to a mix of legend and exaggeration, Bacon was thought to have secret knowledge and magical abilities. In reality, he was one of the early champions of the scientific method. But to those obsessed with the occult, Roger Bacon was like the Renaissance version of a rock star, which is why it isn't a stretch to think one might connect him to the manuscript. Even if there's no real connection, many people, especially powerful ones, took his ideas very seriously. And one of Bacon's alleged beliefs was that human life could be prolonged indefinitely. For a man in a position of power like Rudolph II, the promise of immortality might have been a tempting offer. But this is speculation from an emperor in the 1600s about a man who passed a few hundred years prior. There's no real proof otherwise. So we may never know who the original scribe of the manuscript was. The manuscript has been examined and scrutinized for centuries. It's built up quite the reputation among scholars and has spawned numerous theories about what its content might actually hold. But what clues can we uncover by studying the manuscript itself? The book is bound in a limp vellum cover. It measures 23.5 centimeters in height, 16.2 centimeters in width, and is 5 centimeters thick. Fairly ordinary dimensions. It consists around 234 pages, though some believe it originally had more, with several missing or torn out over the centuries, lost to time. The manuscript is not just one big pile of undecipherable text. At the very least, we know that it's divided into 6 sections, each with its own theme based on the illustrations. And it's, for lack of a better word, trippy. First, we have what scholars call the botanical section. It takes up more than half of the manuscript, filled with drawings of plants. Some leaves sort of resemble known species like violets or lilies, but the rest? It's like someone took bits and pieces from different plants, shuffled them like a deck of cards, and Frankensteined them together. The flowers are alien looking. The leaves curve in weird ways. And some roots look like they were imagined by someone who never left their home, like me. Botanists have been trying to match these plants to anything in the real world for over a century. Some think they're symbolic, like maybe each plant represents a concept in some mystical or alchemical system. Others argue they're stylized versions of real herbs, drawn badly on purpose to hide their identity, like a code. One theory? Researchers Arthur Tucker and Rexford Talbert claim the plants match flora from 16th century Central America, like morning glory tree flowers and prickly pears. If they're right, it could mean the manuscript didn't come from Europe as one might assume, but from the New World, using a now extinct dialect of Nahuatl or some indigenous script. However, a lot of this is debated, as these strange plants can be compared to plants from all around the world. The second part is the astronomical section, and this is where things really start to spiral out of this world. Literally. Lots of circular diagrams, wheels within wheels, and what looks like zodiac symbols, taking up entire pages. Now, at first glance, you'd think, oh, astrology stuff, horoscopes, moon cycles, the usual. And sure, some of it does seem to track lunar phases or solar positioning. You've got these 12-part diagrams that line up with zodiac signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, the whole gang, kind of. But then, it all starts to fall apart. The constellations don't match any known star charts. Not medieval European, not Arabic, not Chinese. It's like the author was either making up their own night sky or had access to an alternate universe with a different layout of stars. Either way, it's not your standard backyard stargazing. Some researchers think the author was trying to map the cosmos, but didn't fully understand the math or the mechanics. Others think it might not even be about actual stars. It could be symbolic. Maybe astrological, mystical, or part of some esoteric spiritual system where the stars represent concepts rather than coordinates. There's even debate about those zodiac symbols. Some of them are recognizable, but others look off. For example, the figures for Sagittarius and Pisces show up, but with weird twists. One Sagittarius figure is holding a crossbow instead of a bow and arrow. Classic medieval creativity or just someone winging it? Who knows? There's definitely a "we're not in Kansas anymore" vibe to it. Some have even suggested it could be based on Jewish Kabbalistic diagrams, early Islamic star maps, or even Indian astronomy, but none of those theories fully line up either. It's all just close enough to be frustrating. Then we have the biological section, which is somehow even stranger. These pages are filled with drawings of naked women, dozens of them, lounging in what looks like tubs or pools, sometimes linked by long, winding tubes. There are entire pages where these women are sitting, standing, or even half submerged in these strange interconnected vessels. The tubes snake around like garden hoses, sometimes sprouting stars or strange roots. It's all very anatomically puzzling. Some scholars suggest these women might represent health or fertility rituals, like ancient ideas of bodily humors or bathing for purification. Others think it could be metaphorical, maybe something to do with alchemy or transformation of the body and spirit. There's even a theory it's connected to gynecology, like an early attempt to map female anatomy. Some of the tubes are mechanical looking, and researchers have compared them to early water circulation systems, like plumbing. Next, we have the cosmological section. This part is packed with circular diagrams and symbols. Some of them look like star charts, like a continuation of the astrological section. Others, they resemble maps of imaginary cities, maybe even blueprints of the human body if it were designed by a cosmic clockmaker. One standout is the infamous 9 rosette foldout, a sprawling 6-page spread featuring 9 interconnected circles, each brimming with stars, castles, and patterns. Some researchers think this might be an abstract representation of the universe, a sort of esoteric cosmic map. Others argue it could be an alchemical diagram, illustrating processes of transformation and the interconnectedness of elements. And then there are those who believe it's a spiritual or mystical depiction, perhaps even a guide to some lost cosmological understanding. The pharmaceutical section includes drawings of plant parts, roots, and jars. Lots of jars. These jars are highly detailed, but they don't resemble anything from known medieval alchemy or apothecary practices. Some researchers believe these drawings could represent medicinal plants or elixirs, but others think the jars could be purely symbolic of something that dabbles in the realm of alchemy. But with no recipe, we're left guessing. Speaking of, the 6th and final section is full of recipes, though recipes is a pretty generous term. This part consists of short paragraphs, each marked with a little star-like symbol. They could be alchemical formulas, potion instructions, or the world's most cryptic cooking guide. But since it's all written in the same undecipherable script, we have no clue what any of the ingredients are. Unfortunately, you're left with no idea what they're making, how to make it, or whether it's meant to cure diseases or turn you into a lizard. The script, referred to as Voynich, doesn't resemble any known language or cipher. It's almost as if someone set out to write the most confusing thing imaginable, and somehow succeeded. Some have speculated that the Voynich manuscript could be the result of a mental health condition such as graphomania, an uncontrollable urge to write often seen in psychosis, or glossolalia, the practice of producing speech or text that mimics language but has no understandable meaning, typically during trance or religious states. Or perhaps it's all an elaborate hoax, written by an ancient prankster or even Voynich himself. Maybe he who wrote the letter, and even put Jacobus Horczycki de Tepenech's signature on the manuscript. And there is even possible evidence of this. When compared to other signatures from Tepenech, some specialists do say the characteristics of the signature make it authentic. However, according to analyst Jan B. Hurek, they don't match the one on the manuscript, not even a little bit, and provide side-by-sides. It could be that Voynich put the signature there to spruce up its value. Maybe he even fabricated the letter. However, there is proof that he likely didn't write the manuscript himself. Let's take a look at Zipf's law. It's basically a law about how often words show up in a language and whether they follow a predictable pattern. The most common word, like the in English, is used about twice as often as the next most common word, of, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. This is common with most languages out there, and when applied to the manuscript, it follows Zipf's law. That possibility rules out both graphomania and glossolalia, as they usually produce chaotic output without consistent structure. However, does that rule out a hoax? Gordon Rugg, a researcher who's been poking at this mystery for over a decade, claims that the manuscript's content is very possible to fake. Rugg came up with a method using a grid of syllables and cards. Slide the card over the grid and it spits out combinations that look like words in this mysterious script. And more importantly, they follow Zipf's law. Does that mean this is a fake? Not necessarily. And Rugg did go in with the knowledge of Zipf's law, which was only popularized by George Kingsley Zipf in the 1930s and 40s, well after Voynich acquired the manuscript in 1912. And others aren't convinced it's a hoax. Dr. Marcello Montemuro and Dr. Damien Zanet, experts in both physics and mathematics, have taken a deep dive into the Voynich manuscript. Using a field in math known as information theory, they go a step beyond Zipf's law. After their analysis, in each of the 6 sections of the manuscript, they found common words only associated with those sections and not in others. Also, they found lots of words with similarities in how they're spelled, like how psychology, biology, and astrology all end in ology. Montemuro says that kind of consistency, the way certain word structures match up with certain images, suggests intent, like there is a meaning hidden somewhere deep inside the mess. If it's a hoax, it's a masterclass in deception, layered, deliberate, and statistically convincing. Now, one might think that perhaps Voynich had this knowledge in the early 1900s, which is not very likely. Regardless, radiocarbon dating of 4 of the parchment papers from the manuscript has determined that the book is much, much older. There's some variation in the age, but we do know the parchment is from sometime between 1404 and 1438. Some debate about the data suggests that range should be wider, between 1391 and 1483. Regardless, it paints a much clearer picture. It was likely written sometime in the late 14th or 15th century. So by the time Roman Emperor Rudolf II got his hands on it in the 1600s, the manuscript was already 100 to 200 years old. If Leonard Rauwolf, the botanist, is the earliest known owner, there's still a big gap of ownership in between. This also puts to bed the theory that Roger Bacon wrote it. He lived from 1219 to 1292. Which is at least 100 years too early from when the parchment was created. So that means either someone with exceptional knowledge of languages that would rival linguists of today wrote this as an elaborate hoax sometime in the 1400s, or it's real. So if it's real, then let's try and solve it. Many have attempted to interpret the manuscript for centuries and failed. Some of the previous owners like Voynich, Berisk, and Tepenech tried to decode it, sometimes with the help from scholars. Many theories emerged from this, from secret societies to references of the Andromeda Galaxy, long before it was recognized as a galaxy. But as with so many of the numerous theories, these ideas were debunked. But there have been theories with a lot of potential, like this one that assumes the Voynich manuscript might actually be written in Old Turkish. Not just an earlier version of today's Turkish, but a much older, more ancient form from the broader Turkic language family. In 2018, a Turkish electrical engineer named Ahmet Ardiç proposed this with help from his sons. They weren't cryptographers or medieval scholars, but language enthusiasts who noticed something interesting. The structure of the manuscript's text matches the patterns of agglutinative languages. To explain, unlike English, some languages, such as Turkish, build words by stacking small pieces of meaning together, like Lego bricks, one on top of the other. For example, ev means house, evler means houses, evlerde means in the houses, and evlerde kiler means the ones in the houses. All built from the same root. The Voynich words often look like they're built in a similar way. Ardiç believes the text is written phonetically, a sound-based version of this ancient Turkish, using symbols the author may have invented or adapted. He even suggests that the manuscript might be a kind of diary, chronicling travel, people, places, and medical knowledge. In 2020, he, along with his sons, claimed to have translated about 30% of the manuscript and are still working on it. They also published a translation of the entire page, categorized as 33V. They say they've decoded over 600 words and continue to share updates on their website and in Turkish academic circles, though mainstream scholars haven't widely accepted their work. Unfortunately, it lacks repeatable methodology that others can verify, and it relies heavily on subjective interpretation. However, one very important person does see promise in this theory, even if she feels it still needs to be verified, and she has an interesting, game-changing theory of her own. In 2020, this woman named Lisa Fagan Davis published an article that claimed the manuscript was penned by 5 people, not 1. In case you're wondering who she is, she received her PhD in medieval studies from Yale University, where she eventually went on to teach Latin paleography. She is currently a professor of practice in manuscript studies at the Simmons Graduate School of Library and Information Science. She is the executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, and she is known as the world's most renowned expert on the Voynich manuscript. She's the one that needs to give a stamp of approval on a theory before anyone takes it seriously, and she's been highly critical of most of them, so she knows what she's talking about. In her paper, she used a digital paleography tool for identifying handwriting to study the script. She discovered that there were 5 distinct handwriting styles, which would imply there were 5 scribes. However, they didn't simply tackle sections. Sometimes they switch scribes mid-page, or even several times in the same page or foldout. And it's been reviewed and confirmed in 2 other papers from 2021, meaning the likelihood of this being true is very high. This would imply that some sort of community put this book together, not just an individual. What if that community was a Hebrew-speaking Jewish community? And what if they wanted to keep their knowledge a secret to outsiders? In 2020, Rainer Hannig, a German linguist, proposed the mysterious Voynich manuscript might actually have been written in Hebrew, but in code, using an invented alphabet. By analyzing how the words are structured, he found patterns that match Semitic languages, especially Hebrew. He ruled out other candidates like Latin, Arabic, and Aramaic based on things like missing grammatical markers, like the Arabic al, and word structure that doesn't fit Indo-European languages. Using Hebrew grammar and dictionaries, Hannig even translated full phrases like, "The farmer groaned over the times," suggesting the manuscript might not be gibberish, just cleverly disguised. If he was right, the Voynich manuscript could be centuries-old Hebrew, and possibly of a local dialect, written in a secret script to keep it private or sacred. Unfortunately, Rainer Hannig passed away 2 years later in 2022, and no one has taken up the mantle of his work. But as with all theories, there's debate as well. Some point to the fact that he uses a common Voynich theory approach, which is to assume that the letters or words are directly related to letters or words from another language, and not everything he decoded makes as much sense as that first line. "I am a bull ready which facilitates and renews house in ruins. You are a piece of lamb which opens the mouth and is discouraged when I. Unfortunately, he falls into the vast forest of other theories that are great at first glance but may not hold up under scrutiny. But he's not the first to propose that the manuscript is a code. It's actually one of the oldest theories out there. It could also explain why the illustrations of the book look so strange, another layer of that code and secrecy. The most notable attempt to crack the code comes from William Friedman, a legend in the cryptography world. He's a prominent American figure that helped lay the groundwork to help crack military codes during World War II. In the 1940s, while leading the U.S. Army Signals Intelligence Service, the predecessor to the NSA, he formed a special team of military cryptanalysts. They had credentials in linguists, paleography, Egyptology, math, and many other science studies. This team would eventually go on to form the backbone of the NSA, so these were heavy hitters, not your average Joes. After hours, they agreed to form what became known as the First Voynich Study Group, and met after hours. Together, their goal was to transcribe the entire manuscript onto IBM punch cards, an early method of storing and inputting data into computers to run computer analysis in search of patterns or clues hidden in the text. It was one of the first serious attempts to apply modern cryptography to the mystery. In the end, they managed to punch at least 48,000 characters. But as the extremely tedious project was after hours, the group stopped meeting and didn't yield any results. Later, in 1962, Friedman tried again with the second Voynich study group, this time using more advanced computers from the Radio Corporation of America. This one was, again, after hours, and they spent several months on it, creating graphs, flowcharts, records, and all manner of tools to help them decode it. They also had a team of women who were transcribing and key-punching the text, known to the group as the Wives. Unfortunately, RCA decided to not allow anyone to use their computers for any extracurricular activities and shut down the group. Friedman believed that the manuscript wasn't a cipher, which would require a key to decipher it, but more like a deliberately invented language, as a type of code. He eventually admitted defeat, concluding that it would be possible but extremely difficult to break the code of the manuscript. One can only imagine what he might have been able to accomplish with today's technology like AI. In fact, AI has been used several times to try and crack the Voynich manuscript by spotting patterns or comparing the text to real languages. Some projects thought they found names or repeating structures in the writing. A more recent attempt in 2025 focused on how the symbols themselves might follow certain rules or visual logic instead of a written language. So far, none of these methods have solved the mystery. They've just added more theories to the pile. Most notably, in 2018, researchers at the University of Alberta, including Professor Greg Kondrak, ran the manuscript through AI, with an algorithm trained on 380 different languages. Kondrak and his team thought the manuscript might be a series of anagrams, where the letters in each word are scrambled, which makes decoding the entire thing even more mind-numbing. The AI tried unscrambling the words and matching them to Hebrew roots. The first translated sentence? She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people. But critics weren't sold. The translation required a lot of interpretive gymnastics, reordering letters, guessing vowels, assuming medieval Hebrew spelling. Basically, the AI might have just gotten lucky. The Verge called it out, saying the method was too subjective. Without consistent logic, any sentence could be twisted into meaning something. Still, the approach wasn't useless. AI helped further cement the theory that the structure of the manuscript's words shows patterns you'd expect in real languages, like syllable repetition, prefixes, suffixes. A good first attempt, but more work is needed if we expect AI to help us solve this mystery. While we haven't uncovered the secrets of the words just yet, we do have some promising theories about the actual content of the book, and some not so promising theories. As you might guess, with any mystery out there, there will always be some wild speculation. And so we explore the idea that this might not be from our world. Is it an extreme version of the Mandela effect? From another dimension? Maybe this is Old English on another Earth, and that's why the plants look so close, but not exact. Or is it a message from another planet? Alien language, alien plants, the women might actually be depictions of this strange species, which could explain why they're depicted in strange vats. It would even explain why the star charts don't line up with anything we have, because from their world, their view of the stars would look different. It could be their directions to a space 7-Eleven. But as you might imagine, scholars don't exactly take this theory seriously. When a BBC journalist visited the Yale Library to view the manuscript, the curator joked, "My favorite is that it is the illustrated diary of a teenage space alien who left it behind on Earth." And of course, other than speculation, there's no proof for any of this. But there may be a better explanation as to why the illustrations are so alien. Some researchers believe these aren't just strange unknown plants, they're symbolic. Part of a much older tradition of what's known as an alchemical herbal manuscript, where plants weren't just drawn for what they looked like, but for what they meant. These manuals weren't practical field guides, they were mystical recipe books, filled with layers of metaphor, coded ingredients, planetary alignments, and instructions for spiritual or chemical transformation. Alchemy wasn't just about turning metal into gold. Voynich analyst D.N. O'Donovan argues the manuscript's botanical sections share its DNA with that genre. She points to a match between Voynich and other alchemical herbals, like Lombard copies of the Tractatus de Herbis. The similarity of the illustrations is such that some have suggested the Voynich manuscript was produced in the same scriptorium, that is to say, the same writing room in medieval monasteries where monks copied manuscripts, specifically in northern Italy, Lombardy, in the 1430s, which would match with the carbon dating. Also, the illustrations of plants in the botanical section, about 98 full-page images, land squarely in the 90 to 100 range you see in most late medieval alchemical herbals, such as the Tractatus de Herbis. This theory starts to make more sense when you line up the Voynich images next to real alchemical herbals from 15th century Europe. These books were often created by physician alchemists, and their pages could include elaborate diagrams for distilling herbal essences, bath rituals for purification, or strange hybrid plants tied to the elements or zodiac. O'Donovan leads into this idea, arguing that the Voynich manuscript may have acted as a kind of mnemonic system, a flashcard-like tool for someone trained in specialized knowledge. The plants, in her view, were never meant to be read literally. They were visual triggers designed to jog memory or unlock knowledge passed on orally, not meant for the average reader. For example, they might use imagery such as these two manuscripts, which show the image for snakewort, where the roots look like the animal. Researchers J.K. Peterson and Edith Sherwood think similar roots in the Voynich manuscript, a winged angel shape and a cat body shape, could point to a plant whose folk name, mythic story, or even special alchemical treatment was linked to that creature in the original language. So it could be that if you were a well-trained medieval alchemist, those curling stems weren't nonsense. They were shorthand for when to fire up the still, which moon phase to work under, and even which planetary metal the plant was tied to. Further confirming its possible origins being from a medieval Italian scriptorium, Alan Tuwade, a well-known historian, compares the Voynich manuscript to other illustrations from the 14th and 15th centuries, which again lines up with the radiocarbon dating. These drawings are from herbals, basically an alchemical herbal without all the sorcery. What's left is a handbook devoted purely to the medicinal side of plants. He found several comparisons where the plants look similar, if not the same. At the very least, the style of illustrations match. He also references the other sections and explains that these are typical sections one might find in an herbal. And the bathing pages look like a reference to thermal baths of ancient tradition. And he believes the final recipe section isn't full of recipes, but more like an index one might find at the end of a large book. Linguist Stephen Bax also compares the Voynich manuscript to herbals. In a 2014 paper, he broke down how herbals often copy from other manuscripts, and with each copy, the plant becomes less and less recognizable. He also mentioned how the plant name was usually the first word of the first paragraph on the page of the illustration. So, with this knowledge, and by comparing comparing these images to other manuscripts, he was able to identify drawings he believes are juniper, hellebore, and centaury, and associated them with a Voynich word. In the end, he concluded that this manuscript was likely not from Europe and may have been from a culture and language that went extinct. To add on to the medical manuscript theory, Lionel Strong, a cancer research scientist and amateur cryptographer, announced in the 1940s that he had decoded part of the manuscript, and it revealed that it had a more specific focus. The text, so far decoded, is in medieval English and deals with the effects of plants on physiological processes in health and disease, especially the diseases of women. He supposedly decoded 2 pages from the book, Folio 78 and Folio 93. A snippet of his decoding in the article he published stated, "When the contents of the womb rip or tear the membranes, the child comes slyly from the mother, issuing with the leg stance skewed and bent, while the arms, bent at the elbow, are knotted above the head like the legs of a crawfish." If the manuscript is about women's health, it would also explain the section with the bathing women. But his theory started to unravel because he never explained how he cracked it. His excuse was present war conditions. World War II was in full swing, absolutely, but he hinted that sharing his decryption method might somehow be risky. He also never got full access to the manuscript to continue decoding. After he passed away, his notes were revealed. When scholars analyzed it, they found that when words didn't work, Strong would erase characters, revealed by the erase marks on his notes, to make the words sound English. And when the key he used was tested on other sections, it only turned into gibberish. But fast forward to 2017, a new player pushes the same theory about women's health. Nicholas Gibbs, a historical researcher and TV scriptwriter. He claimed he cracked the Voynich manuscript once and for all, as many do. Gibbs' big idea? He said the manuscript isn't encrypted at all, just shorthand Latin, like many medical scribbles doctors would pass around in the Middle Ages. Basically, he claims that the Voynich manuscript was a medical doctor's notebook written in lazy Latin. Unfortunately, doctor's handwriting hasn't improved since. He published his research, and it ran in the Times Literary Supplement and got a ton of press. For a minute, everyone thought the mystery was solved. Then experts weighed in, and the excitement fizzled fast. That's because he only translated 2 lines, and even those don't read as proper Latin. Annalee Newitz, a journalist, editor, and author, states, "Unfortunately, his analysis was a mix of stuff we already knew and stuff he couldn't possibly prove." Scholars pointed out that there was no consistent grammar and no confirmed matches to the shorthand system he used. It was like solving a crossword with only the clues you cherry-picked. While Gibbs saw patterns, the rest of the scholarly world saw wishful thinking, as goes many of the Voynich theories, unfortunately. This video covered a lot of theories, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg. Dozens, if not hundreds of theories were left out, some more credible than others. Even a search on Voynich manuscript forums or Reddit will reveal an ocean of self-proclaimed amateur cryptologists who have finally solved the mystery. It's understandable though. Everyone loves a puzzle, and this is the ultimate enigma. The question is, does a solution even exist? Is it attainable? Perhaps with emerging technology like AI and more modern studies, we'll get closer and closer to the truth. We're already certain about a few things. There's a high degree of certainty that it's a real language, or at least follows the rules of one. We know that it wasn't written by only one author, but 5, hinting at a community or scriptorium of monks. Radiocarbon dating proves that this was likely written in the 1400s, which also lines up with how the botanical illustrations match with herbals from that time period, be it alchemical or medical, which also hints at the purpose of the manuscript. We also know what it's not. It's not a hoax written by Voynich, it wasn't written by Roger Bacon or any of the owners we mentioned, and it wasn't a teenage alien's diary left here. Probably. Then, from there, we can only speculate. Is it an ancient version of Turkish, Hebrew, or English? Could it have been written in northern Italy? Is it from a culture that died out? A code or a made-up language? Until we find an elegant solution to decoding the text, we may never know. Perhaps we'll never find out. And one could look at it as frustrating, but you could also just enjoy the mystery of it, and the theories that emerge. Sometimes they're whimsical and silly, other times they're thought-provoking, but they're always engaging. So even though we haven't solved the mystery, as most will claim, it's still a fun mystery to explore, and we hope you enjoyed it. And maybe, somewhere, a 15th century monk is laughing, watching humanity try to decode the unsolvable manuscript he wrote as a joke, having fooled the world for centuries. If you enjoyed this video, then consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more videos, like this one about the mysterious disappearance of the $30 million jackpot winner and how the internet cracked the case by luring the suspect online.
And don't forget to click the link tryfume.com/brew or scan the QR code on the screen to get your free Fume Topper today.